Sure. We're going to begin. If you can all put your phones on silent or... Okay. It's a great honor and a privilege to be here tonight, and on behalf of the WITS alumni, the University of WITS in Joburg, the alumni here in Israel, in Telford, the Jerusalem branch, we welcome you this evening to hear a very special keynote speaker, Richard. The talk is going to be Unstopable, How People with Disabilities Achieve Greatness. I also want to thank the Community Center Beit Abraham for hosting us tonight, and to Roy and to Terry for organizing this event. We're really very grateful. And also Michelle and her team at Telford. What an amazing poster they organized. But most important, to Richard. Richard, you are somebody that we all strive to emulate, an amazing, articulate, but a brilliant poet, writer, orator, and very inspirational speaker. So I want to call on Roy to introduce our amazing guest this evening. And before we start, I just want to, we used to do many events with World Mizrahi, and I'm sure you're all aware that Rabbi Doron Peretz has, in addition to being head of World Mizrahi, he's now been appointed head of the World Zionist Organization. So we wish Mazel Tov. It's a tremendous achievement for the Jewish community in South Africa and for all of us. Such an amazing kavod which he so deserves. Anyway, with further ado, Roy, thanks.
Good evening, everybody. Is anybody here who doesn't know Richard? So that's like an obvious. So, but a small introduction. First of all, a poet, a writer, researches, does great projects in writing articles in different papers, researches people's lives and organizes great videos for them, for their families as a legacy. A man of integrity, honesty, Yirat Shamayim, Chesed. The list goes on and on and on, as you know, this wonderful gentleman. Actually, when I went to Mincha this evening, somebody said to me, "Hey, for Richard." I said, "Come and listen to him tonight. Here he is. He's come back to Ashkora." So Richard, it's all yours. Take it away. An honor and a privilege.
You know, there are 2 or 3 Richards in Jerusalem. They were talking about one of the others, I'm sure. Guys. Okay, folks, in the grand tradition of audio-visual presentations, and this has got nothing to do with Roy or his computer. It always happens that we've got a slight glitch here, so you're going to have to bear with me. I'm going to try and remember the order of the next 41 slides. So if I get mixed up in the middle, please bear with me. This whole issue of people with disability, I've had a fascination with it for many, many years. I don't know if you remember. I'm sure you do. At school, every year we used to do a project. Does anybody remember what they called it in South Africa? At least at the schools that I went to. A theme. A theme. We had a theme every. I think for starting from like standard 3 or whatever.
Not in Joburg.
Not in Joburg. Well, I was at Yeshiva College, and I remember I did a theme on rubber. The production of rubber. So anyway, every year we did a theme, and we had to go down to the library. Remember those things? The library, and research the theme and the topic, and write a book, and get pictures and cuttings from the newspapers and from old magazines and whatever. Fascinating. I remember I did one on fish once on Cecil John Rhodes, and they used to give us like 3 or 4 topics to choose from. And one year we got, one of the topics was Helen Keller. And the minute that I started to read up about Helen Keller as a young boy, I just became totally and utterly fascinated by the idea that, in her case, a woman who was blind and deaf and therefore couldn't speak could live a life of such greatness writing books and giving speeches and receiving the presidential, the highest award in the United States for achievement in life, and inspiring so many people. And it's right. So we can now just remind me what to do here. Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. And for years, I tried to work out how she could have spoken. And it kind of eluded me until I did some research of the whole thing. Does anybody remember what the first word that Helen Keller said?
Water.
Water. Okay. And I happened to be in Birmingham, Alabama quite often over the last 20 years. And I took a trip up to northern Alabama, which is about a 3.5 drive from where I was, just to see the famous water pump, which is where Anne Sullivan, who was her assistant, and by the way, I don't know if you know this, that Anne Sullivan herself was sight impaired. And that's actually what made her such a great candidate for the job of assisting Helen Keller. So she had an inkling of what Helen Keller was going through. Helen Keller wasn't born blind, she blind and deaf. She had a unknown, we don't know to this day what specific childhood disease that she had. At the age of 19 months, she went blind and deaf. And Anne Sullivan created a system of writing on her hands, but in terms of her speaking, there's a whole different ballgame. What she did was this, and I'd like you all to try this out yourselves. Baruch Hashem, we're all, none of us are impaired here. But I would like you to take your 3 fingers and put them on your neck. Put them on your neck, okay, and say, just without actually pronouncing the word, but just shaping your mouths, water. You can feel your larynx moving in a certain direction, right? Okay, now let's actually say the word. Water, water, water. You can feel the vibrations in your larynx, in your vocal cords. Water, water. Now put those 3 fingers on your mouth. Water, water. You can feel the shape of your mouth as you... And by process of trial and error, and it's not trial and error, actually, it's trial, 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 error, error, error over days and weeks and months. Anne Sullivan finally successfully got Helen Keller to start speaking. She never spoke succinctly enough so that everybody could hear her unaided by her helpers. By the way, Anne Sullivan, after she passed away, another great woman became the assistant of Helen Keller. Her name was Polly Thompson. And when Helen was invited to do lectures, she would speak, and Polly would actually then kind of speak the same words as Helen so that it would be clear for the audience. Now I'm going to play you hopefully, okay, Roy, here we go. Here we have Helen Keller.
In this room sits a remarkable woman. She is Miss Helen Keller. She does not see the moon nor the book that she is reading. She sees nothing. She does not hear the rustling of the curtains behind her. She hears nothing. She is deaf and blind. But if you enter our room, she will know. Your lightest footfall will tell her you are coming. Or even tell her who you are, if she knows you, if she knows her old friend, Polly Thompson.
That's Polly Thompson.
Polly has been with Helen Keller 40 years. For nearly half of these, she's been Helen's only companion. Helen's eyes and ears on the world. She talks with Helen by a finger system in which each letter has a sign, like this. When reaching out beyond her dark and soundless night, Helen depends most on touch. 2 other senses remain. There's taste and there's smell. let Helen with Ollie's help tell you. It is not lying to this, or is this to this, but burdens me in my regard. Father, it is not blindness or deafness that bring me my darkest hours. It is, I feel that I put them in not been unable to speak, not really. It is the acute disappointment in not being able to speak normally. No, I mean, I have been home much more, but I have been if I had only acquired long may I feel how much more good I could have done if I had acquired normal speech.
Okay, I skipped. Okay, here we go. The question is, by the way, Helen Keller, some of her more iconic statements on overcoming adversity, although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of overcoming of suffering. Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. And on vision, the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. Profound. Tonight, I would like to tell you stories of some of these remarkable people who, despite their disability, were absolutely unstoppable. Now, I've given this talk before, and there's a constant comment. People come up to me often and say, well, why didn't you speak about Itzhak Perlman? Or why didn't you speak about Ray Charles? These are great musicians, for example. There are so many of these people that we could fill up days and days and weeks speaking about them. So I'm going to hopefully tell you some stories, one or two of them that you might know, one or two of them that I'm quite confident that you don't know about yet, and also discuss the mechanisms that it takes in order to achieve greatness with this disability, both in and out. Another thing, by the way, is that very important to state, and again, based on the comments that I've heard before, there are many people with disabilities, and it's an incredibly challenging thing to overcome. Some people are less and more successful. The people that we're talking about, just like able people, not everybody becomes rich and famous and great. So we're taking these examples. There's no reflection on those people that are not famous.
Are there any people without disabilities?
What's that?
Are there any people without a disability?
That's a very good question, by the way, that we can discuss all night. Good question. But we're talking about profound disability. Okay. So what are the mechanisms that have to be in place in order for people to overcome profound disability? The first one that I want to talk about is neuroplasticity. A certain aspect of the working of the brain, and we're going to take just as an example, sight. How does sight work? We learned this, and thank goodness there are no ophthalmologists. Are there any ophthalmologists here? No, I don't know. Whatever, because who might put me right and something. But okay, when light comes to the eye, first of all, it goes through the cornea, which is this outer layer of the eye, which helps to bend the light to begin the focusing process. It then goes through the pupil. The iris is the colored part of our eyes. The pupil is the black. I always thought, by the way, that it was the pupil that dilated and opened, but it's the iris that actually controls that, and that allows the right amount of light depending on the conditions. You know, if it's a very sunny day or it's a very dark room, the pupil is bigger or smaller to adjust for that. Then goes through the lens, which focuses the light, and the image goes through this vitreous matter, hits the retina, the back lining of the eye, and there cells called photoreceptors turn the light into electrical signals. Those electrical signals are passed through the optic nerve and reach the brain. The brain is divided into various sections and cortexes, some of which relate to our sensory perception. The visual cortex, responsible for sight, is here at the back of the brain, and that is where, when those signals arrive at the visual cortex, there are neurons which they've got a cell-like center, and those neurons process the images that the brain receives, these electrical signals, and they integrate this information together with all the other sensory and other perception that we have in our brain to create what we are seeing as we speak here this evening. By the way, how many neurons does each one of us have in our brains at last count? I'll give you a couple of suggestions. 150, 15,000, 22 million, 126 million, and 86 billion. Do I have any takers for 150? No. 15,000? No. 22 million? No. 126 million?
Yeah.
126 million. Okay. The answer is Harov Kover. Each one of us, as we are sitting here, have got 86 plus billion neurons in our brain busy buzzing around, listening to me speaking. What happens is that if one of those cortexes does not receive information, for example, sight, the brain is plastic enough to reallocate those neurons that are in that section of the brain to other parts of the brain, allowing that person with that deficiency extra sensitivity for, let's say, sight or touch or whatever it is. Aspect number one, mechanism number one, neuroplasticity. I'm about to play you a piece of music and ask you to guess what it is, and this is really unfair because it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but I have a feeling you might be able to find that needle. Your clues are, it's a piece of orchestral music, which means it's anything from 1650 to date, anything from the Baroque period through the classical, romantic to a modern period. There is a choir, and all that leaves you with is hundreds and hundreds of possibilities. Yet try and think of the most iconic piece of music that you can think of. Anybody? That's orchestral with a choir.
Ode to Joy.
The truth is that right, hold on. You've got to go. Now, Ilana was in the car with me coming here, but I promise you that we didn't do a prompting here. And the rest you know. I find it remarkable that in the year 2025, in a room in Jerusalem, Israel, when asked, a group of people are asked to name an iconic piece of music stretching between 1650 and today, the first answer was Ode to Joy. I think that's a remarkable thing, quite honestly. Yes. Okay. And
I'll take payment afterward.
what's that? Okay. And what is even more remarkable about it is, as you all probably know, that's the gentleman who composed it, Beethoven. And what was happening with him when he composed that piece of music? He wasn't going deaf, he was deaf. Okay, he had been deaf for quite a bit, but before the piece was composed, it was published in 1824. And Beethoven was born in 1770, he died in 1827, and right towards the end of his life, it was one of the last pieces that he composed and published. In 1824, he came out with this piece of music. And just to give you a tiny bit of idea of complexity of the music, I don't know if you can see it here, but this is one of hundreds of pages of the score of the Beethoven's Ninth. By the way, it's unusual, this symphony is unusual in that A, it's got a choral part, symphonies don't normally have them, and B, there are actually 4 movements. You'd think that if he was deaf, he'd say, okay, 3 is enough, but no, it's 4 movements, and this is an excerpt. Each line there represents either an instrument or a voice. And some of the lines, by the way, have got 2 instruments on them, and he had to have this all in his head. One of the things that he did to compensate for his deafness was that he actually put his head on the piano to kind of hear, to feel the music, but he couldn't hear it at all. And yet he was determined to do it. What kind of person was Beethoven? Many studies have been made as to Beethoven's character. Amongst them, hypothermia, anybody? I'd never heard of it. Okay, it's a personality type characterized by consistently high energy, cheerful and optimistic mood. It can have challenges such as overconfidence and lack of inhibition. On the total opposite extreme, and can live together with that, Hirschman and Lieb, in their book Manic Depression and Creativity, suggest that Beethoven was manic depressive, had a bipolar disorder that caused extreme mood swings. I think, if those are true, there was probably in those high mood swings combined with hypothermia that got him into this zone of incredible creativity, the confidence, knowing that what he was doing was right, and having a feeling of mission, that he was doing something great, that 200 years afterwards, in a room in Jerusalem, one person says the song we're talking about is Beethoven's Ode to Joy. I wondered if, let's take another contemporary of his, Mozart. Okay, Mozart, who lived from 1756 to 1790, total of 34 and something years, to whom music came like we think about 1 and 1 is 2. That was how he thought about a symphony. Okay, if we compare Mozart and Beethoven's output in their lives, Beethoven in 56 years, Mozart in 34 years. Mozart wrote 41 symphonies as opposed to Beethoven's 9, 54 concertos as to Beethoven's 9, and 23 operas. Beethoven didn't try. He composed typically pieces in his head, and then he just kind of wrote them down as he was eating breakfast. Okay, question is, so in other words, he was not used to struggle. He was not used to, he wasn't resilient in any way in the way that he composed. Would he have, if he had gone deaf, would he have struggled and persevered with his music? Who knows, but Beethoven did. And that brings us to the second mechanism. We said the first one was neuroplasticity, the strength of personality and knowledge of the power of the mission. Helen Keller if you remember what she said, what is my disappointment? My disappointment is that I can't speak well enough, because otherwise I could do even more than I could. She so much believed in what she did, as did Beethoven. Here's a statement, perfectly logical sentence, that you might want to change or think of it alternative. People may achieve greatness despite their disability. True. Would anybody suggest something else that might replace one of the words in that statement?
As a result of it.
Yes, the despite. What is?
As a result of.
As a result of, due to. Okay, as a response to. We find so often that some of the great achievers and creators in the world not just do it despite their circumstance, but as a response to the circumstance. I mean, one of the people that comes to mind is, to my mind, is Van Gogh. Van Gogh, who was profound mental problems, produced this incredible output, and you can actually see his struggle in his paintings. So also great artists who've gone through hard times and sing about them or play about them, you often found their music so much more powerful. So, yeah. Now I'm going to tell you about a gentleman that you might not have heard of. The picture that you're seeing in front of me is the Quintet du Hot Club de France. For those of you who don't know, this group of musicians were the thing in the jazz scene of Europe in the 1930s. They operated out of Paris. They were the leading band. They were the Beatles of their time. Some of you might have heard of Stefan Grappelli, the violinist, the jazz violinist. Okay, Stefan Grappelli, who's the guy over here, founded this jazz band with a guy called Django Reinhardt, the guitarist over here. And they had a specific speciality in jazz, and that speciality was called gypsy jazz. It was kind of a subgenre of jazz, fabulous music. And the reason why it was came from a gypsy feel is that Django Reinhardt was a gypsy. Okay, here we have Django and the quintet playing one of their signature tunes. Nope. There's somewhere here there's sound. Here we go. Okay, thank you, Roy.
Wow.
Anybody notice something strange about the way Django Reinhardt played the guitar? Okay, it's a little bit complicated here, so we're not going to go over it. But Django Reinhardt was playing, I'm trying to work it out, do it the other way around, but the left hand was moving up and down the frets. Now, any great guitarist used all four of his fingers on his hand to play the guitar. Django Reinhardt was playing with two fingers. And the reason why he was playing with two fingers was that when he was 18 years old, I mentioned that he was a gypsy. He was born in Belgium, and he lived in a gypsy encampment. There was a fire. He almost lost his life. But what he did lose, he had two of his fingers amputated. Now you would imagine that a person with two fingers amputated on the fret playing hand would find another profession. But this is what Django Reinhardt was going to do with his life. And he said, I am going to do it with only 2 out of the 4. So he created all sorts of techniques in terms of the way that he played and the chords that he played to compensate for it, became one of the leading and influential jazz guitarists of the first half of the 20th century. Now, if you think that is difficult, let me tell you about Django, by the way, said it's not the technique that makes it good, it's the feeling. Paul Wittgenstein. Anybody heard of Paul Wittgenstein? Okay. Paul Wittgenstein was born in 1887 in Vienna. And early on in his life, he was already recognized as a prodigy on the piano. And he decided he wanted to become concert pianist. It was a natural thing for him. And he had all the facilities for doing it. He's the Wittgenstein family in Austria before the First World War, one of the richest families in Europe. They're big, huge industrialists. So he had all of the educational opportunities and all of the equipment available to him. And he was a great budding pianist. 1914, the First World War breaks out. And he's enlisted in the Austrian army. And in a battle against the Russians, a grenade explodes very close to his right hand. He is taken prisoner of war, and in the prisoner of war camp, his right arm is amputated. End of career. But not for Paul Wittgenstein. He refused to think about any other career in his life. Because the family was wealthy, they could afford to commission some of the great composers of the time to compose piano works for the left hand. Amongst them, and we can actually play this. Amongst them, Benjamin Britten, Prokofiev, Richard Strauss, and most notably in this particular case, Maurice Ravel. Maurice Ravel, and I've got goosebumps now when I think of it. Maurice Ravel wrote a 20-minute piece, a piano concerto for the left hand, that is truly magnificent. If any of you like early modern classical music, if you haven't heard it, when you get home this evening, listen, there are some of the great modern pianists with the great orchestras that perform it. These are people with both of their hands, Baruch Hashem, but they play, you'll see, they only play with the left hand. Some of the great Chinese women pianists, orchestral pianists of the modern age have played it. There's an incredible version by a guy called Rudansky at the piano. And here is just an excerpt. Roy. Thank goodness for Roy. Here we go. Hold on. This is an extract actually of a documentary on Ravel. But it's the... Oh no. Here we go.
It was then that he wrote his two concertos, notably the concerto for the left hand, composed especially for the pianist Wittgenstein, who had but one hand.
Okay. If you get a chance to listen to it. Stephen Hawking, okay, controversial in Israel. Been to Israel, he was in Israel many, many times, the great physicist, but had a complicated relationship with Israel. But he said, the key is to constantly, he's talking about himself, the key is to concentrate on things your disability doesn't prevent you doing well, and don't regret the things it interferes with. Well, Wittgenstein and Django certainly didn't go that path. They didn't go that path of lesser resistance. They faced their hardship straight on, flat on, and achieved greatness. What the Wittgenstein and Django and the next coming examples illustrate is that often what is needed in order for these people to achieve greatness is societal support, whether it's family or community or country or community around the people. Wittgenstein had his family and means to commission the great artists. Django could maybe not have found other people to play with him. But other people were willing, the people around him, the musicians around him were willing to give them the chance. And he needed that, otherwise he would never have been able to achieve what he did. So societal support. Society has not always been kind to people with profound disability. The Roman laws of the 12 tables, first published in 449 BCE, which was kind of a 10 commandments of the Romans in those times, disabled children should be put to death by stoning. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle thought that children with disability would burden resources. In Sparta, to survive to adulthood, children had to be fit and capable. Those who were deemed unfit were left in the wilderness to die. If we look at our Makorot of Jewish sources, then it's kind of ambivalent. Because on the one hand, we know that the Kohanim, for example, with Mumim, with Mumim, and we won't get into the whole pilpul of the halakha, were not allowed to perform the Kohanic duties, or some of them anyway. Yet, they were protected that even though they were not allowed to do it, they were provided for. We know that, for example, people who are blind can't read from the Torah, because you actually, even if they know it by heart, because you have to actually read from the Torah. And yet, if we look at, for example, Vayikra, Perech, Shais, Yud Tet, Pasuk Yud Daled, Lo tekalel cheresh velipnei iver lo titen michshol. Vayareta me'elokecha ani Hashem. You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am Hashem. In other words, there's a recognition that disabled people should be catered for. Okay, but with certain, as I mentioned, a couple of the exceptions. Right. Chuck Close. Anybody? Chuck Close. Chuck Close was born in 1940 in America with severe learning issues, severe learning problems, and he also suffered from an extremely rare condition. And the reason why I put this up on the screen is not because so that you could read it. It's actually because I can read it, because it took me a while just to pronounce the word, and I was worried that I'd forget it when it came to this particular moment in this talk. The inability to recognize faces is known as prosopagnosia. Prosopagnosia, which is face blindness. What's that?
What's the disability called in reading that word?
A neurological disorder where individuals have difficulty recognizing familiar faces. Chuck Close would look at his mother and father and look at them 5 minutes later and not recognize them. And as I said, he had severe learning disabilities. He went to get advice from, like occupational advice. What should he do when he finishes his education, whatever it was? And they said you should become a tradesperson, whatever. But Chuck Close didn't want to do that. He knew what he wanted to do, and he knew that he could be great at it. He wanted to be a painter. And lo, stam a painter. He only was interested in painting one thing, and that was faces. Yes, portraits of people, not full body portraits, not half body portraits, faces. How do you do that? Not only that, but when he was 48 years old, he had another problem. He had what's called a spinal artery collapse. Spinal artery collapse left him a partially quadriplegic. A quadriplegic that cannot recognize faces, that with severe learning disabilities. Chuck Close, the most that has been spent on a Chuck Close painting, and he died in 2013, is $4.3 million. His paintings appear in the great museums in America and in other places. And how did he do it? He understood his problem, so he said, I've got to find a solution. And with the solution, that's Chuck Close, by the way, the solution was to take a photograph of the face of the person that he was going to make a portrait of, blow it up into a huge, large-scale picture, and divide the picture up into grid, in a grid form, so that instead of a whole, just one big face, he had little sections which were not a face. They were just little tiny aspects of a cheek or an eye or a chin or whatever. And then he would then take a massive canvas and put it in grids as well, and then paint each and every square, but not just in a realistic way. It was outstandingly creative. And by the way, this is a self-portrait of his. This is Chuck Close. Here we go, right? Here we go. I think I got it. I got it.
One of the favorite things that we do, our Note to Self series.
Can you hear?
Where we ask people to write letters of advice to their younger selves. Chuck Close had been a preeminent portrait painter for many decades. He's overcome enormous obstacles, learning disabilities, face blindness, and a rare condition that left him mostly paralyzed more than 20 years ago. Here now, Chuck Close's Note to Self.
This is a note to myself at age 14. I was in the 8th grade and was told not to even think about going to college. I couldn't add or subtract, never could memorize the multiplication tables, was advised against taking algebra, geometry, physics, chemistry. Since I was good with my hands, I was advised to aim for trade school, perhaps body and fender work. Never let anyone define what you are capable of by using parameters that don't apply to you. I applied to a junior college in my hometown with open enrollment, got in and embarked on a career in the visual arts. Virtually everything I've done is influenced by my learning disabilities. I think I was driven to paint portraits, to commit images of friends and family to memory. I have face blindness, and once a face is flattened out, I can remember it much better. Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. Every great idea I've ever had grew out of work itself. Signed on to a process yesterday, tomorrow you'll do what you did today. Eventually, you'll get somewhere. No one gets anywhere without help. Mentors, including your parents, can make you feel special even when you are failing in other areas. Everyone needs to feel special.
Remarkable human being. Could he have? Yeah.
The one he had looks like pixels, like we call today.
Yeah, but they're actually this big. Exactly. It's a very interesting observation that the way that pictures are built now in pixels is kind of the technique that. Yeah, it's very interesting because he was doing this already in the 1970s, 1980s. So before that age, that's an interesting observation. Could Chuck Close have done what he did here 200 years ago with a wheelchair and all? Probably not. We're coming now to the fourth mechanism that spurs on greatness in people who allows them, facilitates them, is technological innovation. And it's quite remarkable how over the last 200-300 years, innovation has allowed people to live meaningful lives. And we're going to take a few examples, starting with something. Okay, you might not think of this as technological innovation. I do. In the same year that Beethoven composed Ode to Joy in 1824, a young French lad called Louis Braille, who was perfectly regular kind of guy, had an accident and which caused blindness. And he, again, was determined to learn, to educate himself. And the only way that he came up with to facilitate that was to create a language on paper of, well, we all know what Braille is, named after the inventor of, who himself was blind. What's fantastic about Braille is that unlike, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, which are kind of random shapes, they've all got their historical reason why they are shaped like that. But it's a very, very great, easy methodology. You can see A is 1 dot in the left-hand corner, then B is 2 dots on the left side, and there are 10 symbols, starting from K, which is the 11th letter of the alphabet. It's the same dot, and then again the same 2 dots, but then with 1 dot in the bottom left-hand corner for the next 10 letters, etc. And Braille facilitated the ability of people to learn that just couldn't have learned before him. There were a few attempts, by the way, before him to create some kind of language like that, like this. One of them was actually called night language. Why was it called night language? Because it was used by soldiers in armies in the evening. If they wanted to communicate one with the other without being heard, they didn't want to be heard by the enemy, they would pass around a paper with dots and dashes on there. But that was pretty primitive. Braille was the one that has stayed standard for the last 200 years. By the way, he also devised a way of reading music in Braille. Braille himself. That's an early example 200 years ago. We're going to jump ahead. Rachamim Melamed. Anybody heard of Rachamim Melamed?
Yes.
Okay. Rachamim Melamed was one of the iconic educators in Yerushalayim in the second half of the 20th century. He was he was a Machanech, and then he was a Mefakech. He was known and beloved to thousands of pupils in Jerusalem who grew up in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then in 1994, he got first symptoms of Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. In 1999, 5 years, and in 1999 he collapsed, and he was literally dead. And unfortunately, I don't know his name, but a South African doctor think a neurologist at Hadassah. Actually, I heard this from Rachamim himself, saved his life. But he was given just a couple of years to live. He lived 21 years on from them. All of those years, he was in a wheelchair, lying prone, on a respirator. I had the great fortune and privilege of actually meeting him at his home, where he was in this kind of horizontal wheelchair, 2 workers, 2 assistants at his side 24 hours a day to check the respirator that it was operating, to drain it all the time in shifts after shift after shift for 20 years. The only part of his body that he could move independently on his own were his eyes. And with his eyes, with the help of technology, if you can see, I don't know if you can see the picture here, it's a camera. This camera is reading Rachamim's eyes, transferring the information to the screen, and that is how Rachamim Melamed wrote tens of books, some of which are also illustrated by him. This is a book of his, for example, Nashim B'Tanakh, fantastic book, all about various women in the Tanakh, and with illustrations, beautiful illustrations. And I had, as I say, I had a privilege of having a relationship with him, which included swapping emails. I would write him an email, and like the next day he would send me a detailed email back, all via his eyes. Without this technology, that would not have been possible. And just one more example. This, by the way, I'm not going to show you the video here, but Shirley Pinto. Anybody heard of her? Okay, Chavirat Knesset, who was deaf. She's the first deaf Chavirat Knesset. And by the way, not only was she deaf, but her husband, both her parents, and both her children were all deaf and living normative, productive lives.
The professor's name is David Linton.
Thank you. David Linton. Okay, right? Okay, can you tell us something about him there, or did you pick him up?
He created this mechanism to massage and work on Rachamim's lungs, keep the respiratory, and then it was used for Chayalim afterwards.
Okay. Ari Spitz, Gibor Milchama. Okay. For those of you who know the story, I'm not going to tell the whole story, but this is a boy that was so severely injured in the Gaza war now that I think just by a combination of tefillot and his parents and family's refusal to let this young man die, despite the fact he lost both his legs, one of his arms, and was just so severely injured that it was impossible that this boy would live. But through technology, not only did he survive, but he is a remarkable, remarkable man spreading the good word, and the effects of, or the help of, technology is an aid. It's him that does it, but without it, it would not have been possible. I'm now going to tell you a story, and this is the last story, and the Cape Townians here have heard this before, but and many of the Johannesburg people know it as well, but I think it's worth hearing, reflecting on as many times as you possibly can. I mentioned at the beginning that what got me going with this fascination on this subject is Helen Keller. But there was another person very, very influential in my life and in the way that I thought about people with the severe and profound disability. Cantor Abe Immerman. The first time that I saw him as a 12-year-old pick standing outside the garden shul. I saw this very well-dressed, upright gentleman walking with a white stick towards the entrance of this shul. He knew exactly where to go. He knew exactly how to. He didn't have anybody with him, and I found this quite remarkable. He impacted my life in another way, and Mordechai over here will remember. What number Kloof Road were you?
92.
In 1980, in around about July, August, at Kloof Road, number 92 in Sea Point, Cape Town, Mordechai Wolf and I sat down at the table, the family table, dining room table. Remember the old cassette tapes, and you press play, and we heard, and I wish I could do it like he did, HaMelech Shacharit for Rosh Hashanah. And the first time that I davened Shacharit for Rosh Hashanah, I used Cantor Immerman's Nusach. Abraham Immerman was born in 1907 in Cape Town. His name was Abraham ben Abraham because his father had passed away before he was born. His mother remarried and died when Abe was 5. He lost both his parents by the age of 5. But before that, also when he was 19 months old, just like Helen Keller, he got a childhood disease, German measles in this case, and he went blind. So here we have in 1907, living with his stepfather. Both of his parents have died, and he is blind. His stepfather took him in, looked after him, fostered him, and his stepfather was a traveling salesman. So he would go around with his stepfather from dorp to dorp, selling, just sitting on the wagon behind, as his father sold his merchandise. Father eventually settled down, like probably many of your grandparents, settled down in a little town somewhere, and opened up what's that? Al-Khamana Handelaars. Okay, right. The general store that Abe Immerman's stepfather opened was in a town called Zastron. Zastron is in the middle of the Durangon nowhere, okay, in the Free State. And there were just a sprinkling of Jews in Zastron. The country communities were just starting up then, appointed a rabbi whose name was Reverend Josephowitz. Reverend Josephowitz was appointed to be the roving rabbi for about 7 or 8 of these towns. He would go from town to town, a week here, a week here, a week here. Abe's stepfather they kept a kosher home. That was number one advantage. Number two, they had a little room just outside of their house, and that room became the shul and the cheder for the 1.5 Jewish children in Zastron. Abe Immerman wasn't invited into the class because he couldn't read the Siddur. He was teaching Shema Yisrael and Modiani and the 10 Commandments and Shabbat and Kashrut. Abe would sit on the outside on the steps to the room. And one fine day, Reverend Josephowitz walked out and he heard Abe Immerman say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem. And he listened out and he realized that Abe Immerman was reciting every single thing that he had said in the classroom. Without a Siddur, without a Chumash, he had the ability to remember all of this by heart. So Josephowitz said, well, okay, come inside. And so he started to learn the tefillot. At the age of only at the age of 15 he was sent. He had no education. At the age of 15 he was sent to Worcester, to the blind school in Worcester. You guys are from Worcester, okay? And there he learned Braille. And at 18, when they asked all of the young people that were graduating from Worcester Blind School, you have the following options for a career. You can be a basket weaver, or you have all various trades that people could manage without sight. When they came to Abe Immerman, he said, I want to be a chazan. Possible. Lo yachol liot. But he said, and this is his mantra, I will try. I will try. Maximum, it doesn't work out, I'll do something else. But this is my mission. He went back to Zastron, and Reverend Joseph Povitz, one fine Friday, he was supposed to lead the Friday night at Tefillot, and he got sick. So they asked the young boy if he could lead the services. And b'mikre, there was a visitor in that area who had connections to Oudtshoorn, and he was blown away by Abe Immerman, the blind boy, doing the Friday night service. What is this picture? Not Abe Immerman. What's that? Feathers from Oudtshoorn. In the 1920s, Oudtshoorn was called the Jerusalem of the South. Okay, these Jewish ostrich farmers were the suppliers for all of the ostrich feather fashion that was a rave in Europe at the time. You know, the Paris, etc., etc.
Grandfather was.
Really? Okay, there you go. And Abe went down to Oudtshoorn and started to learn Nusach and singing with the rabbi there. His name was Simonovitz, I think. And he was one of the rotating chazanim there of the Shabbat service. Then somebody, Simi Weinstein. The Weinstein family of Oudtshoorn had a young son who was coming up for bar mitzvah, and they said to Kenta Immerman, would you teach him his bar mitzvah? What? So he said, what did he say?
I will try.
He learned, he got somebody to sing to him the Haftarah and the Maftir. Immediately he could sing it by heart. And Simi Weinstein, who became, he was at Telfed, right? Simi Weinstein, who later was with Telfed, was his first bar mitzvah pupil. He started getting gigs for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The first one was at Woodstock in Cape Town. They said, we'll give you an assistant who will stand next to you so that if you mess up the words or whatever, he'll just put you right. He said, no, if I know there's somebody standing next to me, I won't put my full heart into it. And for years he was at Woodstock. He traveled all the way to Salisbury 2 or 3 times to be the Chazan for Rosh Hashanah in a shul there. And then he went to Cape Town. Before Herzliya School, there was, I don't know what the name of the school was before, there was kind of a predecessor to Herzliya School, and they were looking for somebody who could teach Hebrew and teach a bit of music and Shabbos tunes and everything else. For 46 years, Kenta Immerman would go down to Herzliya School from class to class to class. He would walk in on the first day and say, children, I would like you please to stay in the same seats for the whole year. Now please tell me your names one by one. And that is how he had thousands of pupils whose names and voices he remembered his entire life. A person would come up to him 40 years later on the beachfront in Cape Town, my mother-in-law included, and he would say, the person would, hello, Kenta Immerman, this is, and he said, no, you don't have to tell me who this is. This is, in this case, Gertie Lonstein. He says, yes, I was at your wedding 40 years ago. I remember having a good whiskey there. He learnt the perpetual calendar so that if a bar mitzvah, not only would he teach the bar mitzvah boys, but he would tell the parents, he would say to the parents, when was your son born? The 1st of February 1950. So 1st of February 1950, that was a Tuesday. His bar mitzvah will be on the 3rd of February 1963. It's Parashat Vayechi. He could do it. When I met him at the age of 92, I said to him, Kent Immerman, tell me, what day was I born in? And I gave him my birth date. And he says, listen, I'm 92. I said, well, just have a batch. Of course, he got it right. He didn't know the hour, but he knew the day of the week. For 49 years in a row, he led the Pesach Seder at Highlands House, the retirement old age home in Cape Town. Taught generations of bar mitzvah boys. The one thing that he couldn't do, and I mentioned it before, by halacha, he couldn't read from the Torah, even though he knew it off by heart. Okay, but as a special gift to Herzliya School when he retired, some of you may know that they gave him a trip to Israel. And he came to the Beit Knesset Hagadol in Yerushalayim. He was there for Shabbat, and they gave him maftir. In other words, somebody else was called up for maftir, and he read the Haftarah. And it created such an emotional moment in the great synagogue in Jerusalem. This very staid British shul, for those who know, that literally people came at the end of the tefillah, at the end of the Haftarah, as he was coming off the bima, they lifted him up in a chair and carried him to his seat. It was...
Which is an anecdote in the book.
Sure. I'd like to present you with Roy Sher, ladies and gentlemen. He is a really amazing guy. So
that Shabbat I remember very clearly. My parents used to live in Kiryat Wolfson, and he came to us, Ken Zimmerman came with Sami Weinstein to our house for Shabbat meals. We took him to the Beit Knesset Hagadol. At that time I was young, not like now, and I was one of the fortunate young Gabaim of the shul. And I spoke to the Jaffe family, I told them the story, what's happening, who this gentleman is, and it would be an honor to give him Haftarah, Maftir Haftarah. But in Beit Knesset Hagadol, the Haftarah is read from a klaf. So this became an issue because this is a klaf. Can he read from the klaf? Happens to be that there's a small Beit Knesset of Adot HaMizrach in the entrance of Beit Knesset Hagadol where Rav Ovadia Yosef Zecher Bracha davened every Shabbat. So we arranged, a few of us would go down, Jaffe family, myself, tell the story to Rav Ovadia. He thought about it for a minute or two, gave up psak halacha. It's okay, the klaf will be opened, and there'll be somebody else standing next to him as if he is reading from the klaf, but Kent Immerman will read from the said after Rabbi Alpeh, which was the kavod. And then when Chazan Hirschtig Zichrono Bracha did Musaf, the joy and the brightness, the smile on Kent Immerman was just something else. So thank you.
Okay. Wow. Here we have I found a little short excerpt at a wedding. Kent Immerman went to many, many weddings. By the way, he was married twice, but he didn't have any children, but he left hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, Yeladav. Again, here we go. Good old South African event. It's just that little clip, but it just what a beautiful. What's that? That was his voice. Yeah. I'm going to give you an understanding of how self-aware this man was. When he was 96, I'd met him when he was about 92, and he was really so with it, unbelievable. 96, they were giving him his third bar mitzvah at Highlands House. He was going to do the Haftarah, he was going to give a speech. And on the Friday, he said to his assistant, he said, you know, I've had a great life. It's time for me to go. I'm tired, it's time for me to go, but how can I disappoint all those people that have been invited to my third bar mitzvah? Shabbos, he made the speech, he sang, and on Sunday morning he said to his worker, that's it. And he closed his eyes and he died. Quotes from Cantor Immerman. I'll try. As long as I could do my duty and be of service to humanity, I was happy. You in your own mind must be satisfied that, he preceded this, I didn't write it in here, but he said some people, and we all know this from Shul, right? Some people will say I sang too long. Some people will say I sang too short. I sang too high. I sang too low. You in your own mind must be satisfied that you have performed your duties well and done the right thing. Folks, the journey of these people, and so many more, overcoming physical handicap to achieve greatness, are testament to the indomitable human spirit. We're coming to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Django Reinhardt, to Beethoven. These individuals show us that determination, creativity, and adaptation can break down barriers. We've learned about those four mechanisms: the neuroplasticity, the strong will and understanding of your mission in life, the social community that is around you, and the help of technology. These people's stories inspire us to view challenge not as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities for growth and innovation. Ultimately, their legacy reminds us that greatness can emerge from adversity, inspiring us to pursue our dreams regardless of limitations. And if we want to take as a model of how to overcome disability, we take the greatest Jew of them all. Okay, how did he start off his mission? Hashem said, Moshe said to Hashem, Kaved pe uchvad lashon anochi, I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. And he became the greatest Jew that ever lived. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Richard. I think Richard has been hosted by Telfed 3, 4, 5, 6 times now. These talks have been brilliant, but I guess you'll all agree with me, there hasn't been a talk of this level ever. Richard, this was unbelievable. But really, kol hakavod. In the name of Telfed and Wits alumni, here is a gift for you. Enjoy it.
Thank you. Not necessarily. The fact that people came and listened, that's my gift. But thank you very much. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Telfed, really. Roy and Terry and Les from the Wits alumni do such fantastic work for all of us. Kol hakavod.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
There are refreshments, schmooze, talk, chat. Enjoy.
Okay, too early. Well, somebody will pay to us in that much.
They say my daughter, my grandson.